Every Sunday, like clockwork, I returned to the bench by the lake. It wasn't much, just a weather-worn strip of wood nestled between two old trees whose branches dipped low like they, too, were tired of holding on. But it was mine. In a way that nothing else really was. The world could spin as fast or as cruelly as it wanted, but the lake? The lake remained constant. Still. Gentle. Undemanding. I liked that. I liked the quiet, too. Silence didn't ask questions. It didn't pry or pity. It just sat beside you, like an old friend who understood you didn't need words to be heard. So that's where I went after everything fell apart, after the call, the funeral, the aching months that followed like shadows that wouldn't lift. That's where I took my grief and laid it out across blank pages in charcoal and ink. I sketched the ripples in the water. The ducks that drifted aimlessly. The outline of a child chasing bubbles near the willow tree. It made the pain feel manageable. Measurable. Like if I could capture the stillness, maybe it would seep into me. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, my sketchbook, and a pencil case held together by sheer wool and tape. The world felt far away from that spot. Even the city's noise couldn't reach me there. It was my sanctuary. My pause button. And then one Sunday, he was there. At first, I barely noticed him. Just another figure walking by, slowing down, maybe admiring the lake. But then he sat on my bench. Not close, just at the opposite end. Respectful. Quiet. But still. I didn't look at him directly. Just side-eyed him over the top of my sketchbook, heart beating faster than I wanted it to. He had a worn brown coat, a scarf looped lazily around his neck, and a book in his hands, pages already open like he'd been halfway through before even arriving. I waited for him to speak. People always did. Ask if I was drawing them. Ask if I came here often. Ask if I was okay. But he didn't say a word. He just read. I kept sketching. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. We existed in tandem. No introductions, no interruptions. Just the soft scratch of pencil against paper and the occasional flutter of a page turning. When I stood to leave, he didn't look up. And when I glanced back once before heading toward the path, he was still reading. I told myself it was nothing. A fluke. A one-time thing. But the next Sunday, he was there again. Same place. Same scarf. Same book, though a few chapters further in, judging by the creased spine. Again, no words. Just silence shared between two strangers on a bench by a lake. I don't know why I didn't leave. Why I didn't choose another spot. Maybe because, deep down, I wasn't as alone as I liked to pretend. Maybe because something about his presence didn't feel like an intrusion, but a companion in solitude. I began sketching him before I realized it. At first, just the outline of his shoes, the fall of his coat. Then his hands, long fingers holding the book like it was something sacred. And later, the curve of his jaw, the way his brow furrowed when he read something sad. I didn't know his name. Didn't know why he kept coming back. But part of me began to hope he would. Something was changing. I could feel it. Not loud. Not fast. Just quietly, like ripples on still water. The third Sunday, he beat me there. I stood at the top of the gravel path, coffee thermos in hand, my scarf tucked high against the wind, and saw him already seated on the far side of the bench, book in hand, just like before. And something strange fluttered in my chest. Relief. That was the word, though I didn't want to admit it. I wasn't used to expecting anyone anymore, much less wanting them to show up. But there he was, exactly where I hadn't realized I hoped he'd be. I walked slower than usual, trying to decide what that meant. When I reached the bench, he looked up for the first time. A nod. Nothing more. But it was the kind that made my breath catch acknowledgement without intrusion. A wordless greeting that felt oddly intimate. I returned it with a small nod of my own before sitting down in my usual spot. For a while, we said nothing. I sketched. He read. Occasionally, the wind stirred the water, sending tiny ripples across the surface like the lake itself was sighing. The silence between us was different now. Not empty, but full-charged in a way I didn't have the language for yet. I glanced sideways. He had a quiet face. Not handsome in any dramatic way, but gentle. Thoughtful. The kind of face that seemed carved from calm itself. His hair was a mess of waves, more salt than pepper at the temples. There was a crease between his brows, like he was always halfway between a thought and a memory. He caught me looking. I looked away too quickly. Idiot, I told myself. He turned a page. I focused on the sketch in front of me, just a tree trunk, for now. But the pencil felt heavy. My hand was slower. And when I glanced at the page again, I realized I'd drawn his hands instead. They were resting on his knee now, his book momentarily closed. As if he, too, was simply being here. With me. Still no words. But somehow, the silence had shifted. The next Sunday, it rained. Not a storm, just a steady, persistent drizzle that left the air smelling like wet leaves and forgotten promises. I almost didn't go. But habit or something deeper drew me there anyway, umbrella in one hand, sketchbook protected beneath my coat. He was there again. No umbrella. Just his scarf pulled tighter and his coat spotted with raindrops. The book was closed this time. He looked up as I approached, and something flickered in his expression, like surprise softened by something warmer. Recognition. Maybe even hope. You came, I said before I could stop myself. The words hung there, suspended between us, startling in their existence. His smile was slow but sure. So did you. His voice was soft, deeper than I expected. It settled into me like a song I hadn't heard in years but somehow still remembered the lyrics to. I sat beside him, not at the edge this time but closer. Just a few inches. Enough to notice the way he smelled books, rain, something vaguely herbal. Maybe mint. He pulled a small umbrella from his bag and held it over both of us. I stared at him, the corners of my mouth lifting despite myself. You were prepared. I was hopeful. That made me blush. I hid it behind my cup of coffee. We didn't say much after that. But we didn't need to. When I opened my sketchbook, he didn't look away. "You're an artist," he said quietly. I hesitated. "I draw. It helps me breathe." He nodded, like he understood the kind of breathing that had nothing to do with lungs. I turned the page and showed him. The sketch was of the lake. But he was there, his figure hunched slightly forward, book in lap, head bowed in concentration. He looked at it for a long time. Longer than I expected. "You drew me?" "Yes." He didn't ask why. I liked that. "Instead," he said, "I'm Daniel." His name felt like a warm stone in my hand. "I'm Emma." He smiled again. "Hi, Emma." And I realized then this was how it began. Not with fireworks or declarations. Not with rushed coffee dates or forced conversations. Just a quiet bench. A few raindrops. Two people who'd forgotten how to start, starting anyway. The bench became ours before I could stop it. Every Sunday, we returned, me with my sketchbook, Daniel with his worn book, the one with dog-eared pages and a thin green ribbon marking his place. We never planned it. There were no text messages or promises. And yet, I always knew he'd be there. And he always was. It was the first kind of consistency I'd let into my life in a long time. We spoke in small fragments now. A shared comment about the weather. A quiet laugh when a duck waddled a little too confidently toward a toddler's snack. A murmur when a breeze caught a loose page from his book or fluttered the edge of my sketchbook. But most days, our conversations were wordless. The shhh of turning pages. The scritch of pencil on paper. The soft tap of his coffee thermos as he set it between us, a quiet offering. There was comfort in the rhythm of it. Somewhere along the line, I started sketching more of him. Not just his hands or his coat, but him. The way he tilted his head slightly when reading. The way his thumb tapped the side of the book unconsciously when he was thinking. The half-smile that appeared whenever the ducks got into one of their absurd, waddling quarrels. He never minded. If he noticed, he never said. But once, he surprised me. I was sketching the trees, how the last golden leaves of autumn clung to them like they weren't ready to fall, and I felt his eyes on me. "Do you always draw what you see?" he asked. I paused. "Not always." "What else, then?" "What I feel," I said, before I could catch the honesty in it. He nodded slowly, looking out over the water. "I think that's why I read," he said after a moment. "Not to escape, but to remember that people still feel deeply. That emotions don't just disappear." I looked at him then, really looked. His gaze was far off, fixed on the still lake. There was something buried in his voice, in the way his fingers clenched around the edges of the book. Loss. Maybe not recent, but real. I wanted to ask. I didn't. Instead, I turned the page in my sketchbook and began anew, drawing his profile against the lake. Gentle lines. Soft shading. The breeze had lifted his hair slightly, and the morning sun glinted off the edges of his scarf. That was the first time I noticed he never read the title of his book aloud. Never showed the cover. Always closed it gently when I tried to glance over. A part of me wondered if it wasn't a story at all but something of his. A journal. Letters. Memories. I didn't ask. But the mystery settled somewhere beside me, as quietly as he did. The following Sunday, he brought coffee. Not the kind from a chain store, but something homemade. Strong, dark, warm. It smelled like cinnamon and something faintly nutty. "For you," he said simply, holding it out in a battered metal flask. "You didn't have to. I wanted to. There was no need for more than that." I took it, our fingers brushing just slightly. The warmth seeped through the metal, through my gloves, all the way to my chest. He didn't expect anything in return. So I gave him something anyway. I tore a page from my sketchbook, a simple pencil drawing of the lake at dawn. Mist curling off the water. A bench. A lone figure sitting with a book in hand. I handed it to him without a word. He stared at it for a long time. When he looked at me, there was something softer in his expression. Something unspoken, but understood. He folded the page with care. Placed it between the leaves of his book, and didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. From that day on, I began looking forward to the sound of his footsteps approaching. To the familiar rustle as he sat beside me. To the shared ritual of two people who didn't need noise to be seen. Sometimes love doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes, it tiptoes in with coffee and silence, and stays. It had become more than a ritual by then. The bench wasn't just a place anymore, it was a feeling. A pause in the middle of life's noise. A space where I could exist without explanation, and so could he. But something shifted that Sunday. It was colder than usual. The kind of cold that made your breath visible and your fingers stiff, even through gloves. I'd brought my coffee, but it had cooled too quickly. My hands ached from holding the pencil, and the wind kept pulling at my pages. Daniel arrived a little late. I turned as he approached, expecting his usual scarf and book. But this time, he carried something else, a small white paper bag and two tall cups in a cardboard holder. He sat beside me with a soft, familiar sigh and handed me one of the cups. "Hazelnut latte," he said. I guessed. I blinked. "How? You always wrinkle your nose when your coffee's too bitter. And once, you smiled just a little when I had hazelnut creamer in mine." I stared at him, surprised. It hadn't occurred to me that he noticed things like that. "Thank you," I said quietly. He handed me the paper bag next. Inside was a croissant, golden, flaky, still warm. "It looked like a sketch-worthy pastry," he said. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound startled me. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Not the polite kind, but the kind that snuck out because it wanted to. "You might be right," I said. "It has excellent layering." He smiled at that, pleased. "I used to bake. A long time ago. Professionally." He shook his head. "No, just, for someone." There was weight in those last two words. I felt it settle between us. I didn't press. But I wanted to. For the first time, I found myself craving pieces of him, not just what he chose to show, but what he tried to hide. We sipped our coffee in silence for a while. The lake rippled with the breeze. A pair of ducks swam in slow circles, completely unaware of how fragile and lovely everything around them was. "Can I ask you something?" he said suddenly. I nodded, surprised. "Why do you come here?" I hesitated. My first instinct was to deflect, to offer something vague and safe. But his voice held no judgment. Only curiosity. Maybe even understanding. "My mom used to bring me here when I was little," I said slowly. "She'd sit on this bench and read while I chased the ducks and got my shoes muddy." A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "She died a few years ago. After that, I stopped coming. For a long time. Then one day, I just did. I brought my sketchbook, and I sat here. I thought it might hurt. But it didn't. Not in the way I expected. It felt like she was here. Like maybe part of her still lingers in this place." Daniel looked out at the lake for a long time before responding. "I lost someone, too," he said. "Not death, but a different kind of leaving." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. But I felt it in his voice, that hollow space where someone used to live. We didn't need to fill the silence that followed. It felt sacred, like breathing the same moment together. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. It was a folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully. It was a poem. Handwritten. The ink slightly smudged, like it had been carried around for a while. I read it slowly, line by line. It wasn't perfect, some phrases stumbled, some rhymes felt raw, but it was real. Honest. Full of yearning. "You wrote this?" I asked, softly. He nodded, almost shy. "I used to write poems. For her." My throat tightened. "Do you still love her?" He was quiet for a beat too long. "I don't know," he said. "But I don't think about her when I'm sitting here with you." That sentence settled in my chest like a stone tossed into still water, rippling outward, unexpected and deep. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. I just reached into my bag, tore out a fresh page from my sketchbook, and began to draw. His hands, again wrapped around the coffee cup. His eyes, soft and distant. The wind playing with the corner of his poem beside him on the bench. When I was done, I signed the bottom with my name and the date, then placed it on his lap without a word. He looked at it, and then at me, and I saw it, that flicker of warmth, of something blooming slowly beneath the surface. Maybe this wasn't just about healing. Maybe this was about beginning. I didn't mean to fill so many pages with him. But somewhere between his first quiet nod and that hazelnut latte, Daniel had become a part of my sketchbook. A part of my Sundays. A part of something I didn't have a name for yet. I never showed anyone my sketchbooks. Not really. They were mine, private little spaces where grief had a shape and memory had a face. But that week, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the poem. Maybe it was the coffee. Maybe it was the way he said he didn't think about her when he was with me. Whatever it was, I found myself flipping through my drawings before heading to the lake, and realizing something I hadn't noticed before. He was in all of them. Not just sketches of him, but versions of him. Daniel in winter. Daniel lost in thought. Daniel laughing quietly at a duck parade. Daniel, alone on a bench, reading a book that might have been filled with heartbreak. That Sunday, I brought the older sketchbook with me. The thick one with the blue elastic band I rarely opened in front of anyone. I sat down beside him as always, but I didn't reach for my pencils. Instead, I handed it to him. He looked at me, puzzled. "What's this?" "Just pages," I said. "But they're yours too." He hesitated, then took the book carefully like it was breakable. He opened it slowly. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Just turned one page after another. I watched his fingers trace the edge of a sketch. His expression was unreadable, his eyes caught between awe and silence. "These are beautiful," he said finally, voice low. "They're honest," I replied. "That's all I know how to be." He turned to one of the last drawings, my favorite. Him, sitting sideways on the bench, looking at the lake, with sunlight breaking through the branches above like scattered gold. I'd used ink for that one, and a splash of watercolor for the sky. It was peaceful. Still. But there was something soft in it too, almost vulnerable. He stared at it for a long time. "That's how you see me?" he asked. I nodded. "Not always. But in that moment, yes." His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't think anyone's ever seen me like that before." Something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. "I didn't ask for you to show up, you know," I said, forcing a small smile. "That bench was my space. I didn't mean to intrude." "I know. That's why you stayed." He closed the sketchbook and handed it back gently. Our fingers brushed again, this time longer, intentional. His touch was warm. "Would you ever draw me, looking at you?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I blinked. "I have. I just haven't shown you that one yet." His lips curved slightly, amused. "Why not?" "Because it's the most dangerous one," I said honestly. He tilted his head. "Dangerous how?" "It feels like it knows something I'm not ready to admit." He didn't press. He just nodded slowly, the way he always did when he understood more than I said aloud. The wind picked up, lifting the last yellow leaves off the trees. One drifted onto the bench between us. He picked it up and tucked it inside his book like a bookmark. "You keep little pieces of the day," I murmured. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just don't want to forget." We sat quietly after that. No need to fill the space with noise. His presence was enough. Before we parted, he looked at me and said, "You make the world more beautiful, Emma. Even the broken pieces." I wanted to say something back. Something real. But the words lodged in my chest, too big for my throat. So I just smiled. And that night, I stayed up late and drew the most dangerous sketch of all, Daniel, looking at me, like I was the one who mattered. And in the lines of his gaze, I saw it, the beginning of something real. The following Sunday, he wasn't there. It was the first time since he'd shown up on that bench, gentle, unexpected, with his worn book and quiet presence, that I sat alone again. I told myself not to care. People miss things. People have lives. It didn't mean anything. But I still caught myself looking at every path that led to the lake, my pencil unmoving on the page. I drew nothing that day. Just sat, listening to the water lap softly at the shore, trying to convince myself that the emptiness beside me didn't matter as much as it did. I left a little earlier than usual, my coffee half finished, the wind colder than it had felt in weeks. On Monday, I returned. I didn't even realize I was doing it until I found myself at the lake again, sketchbook in hand, heart quietly hoping. But he wasn't there either. Tuesday, still nothing. It was Wednesday when I found the note. It had been slipped into the wooden slats of the bench, folded carefully, my name written in small, neat script across the front. Emma. My hands trembled as I opened it. I didn't mean to miss Sunday. I wanted to be here. But life sometimes pulls you back when you least expect it. I just didn't want you to think I'd forgotten. Or that what we share is something ordinary. Because it's not. Not to me. I'll be back. Soon. If you're still willing to sit beside me. Daniel. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't believe the words, but because I did. And they made something tighten inside my chest, something fragile and afraid and deeply, dangerously hopeful. I tucked the note into my sketchbook, between the pages where I'd drawn him looking at me. And I waited. The next Sunday, he came back. He didn't say anything at first. Just sat beside me like no time had passed, like the silence between us was a thread that hadn't snapped, just stretched. But I felt the difference. It was in the way he looked at me. The way his eyes lingered, asking something quiet. The way his fingers brushed the bench a little closer to mine, almost touching. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I turned to him, my voice softer than I intended. "You don't have to be." "I do," he said. "Because you've become something constant in a life that hasn't had constants for a long time." I didn't know what to say to that. So I said the truth. "You scared me. Not because you left, but because I realized how much I wanted you to come back." His gaze dropped to his hands, where he was fidgeting with the edge of a folded paper. Then he handed it to me. Another poem. I unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the thin paper. "There's a girl who sketches silence. Like it's something sacred. She draws with her breath. Paints with her ache. And never says what she's thinking. But somehow, I still hear it. She showed me how stillness can feel like a beginning. And I'm terrified. Because I think I've started to." I folded the paper back and held it tightly in my lap. "I never used to show anyone my drawings," I whispered. "I never used to let anyone read my words." "So what are we doing?" I asked. He looked out at the lake, where the ducks floated quietly and the sky had turned the soft color of late afternoon. "Maybe," he said, "we're learning how to be seen." I didn't respond. Instead, I reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. Didn't question it. He just held it. Our fingers tangled together like they'd always belonged that way. And for the first time, silence didn't feel like something we sat inside. It felt like something we had created together, intentional. Intimate. Enough. The first day of June smelled like honeysuckle and sun-warmed grass. Daniel arrived with 2 coffees and a blueberry muffin, which he placed between us like an offering. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me my cup and settled in beside me like he'd been doing it his whole life. I'd never had someone fold so gently into my world. We sat in silence, letting the warmth soak into our skin. The lake shimmered with lazy sunlight, and children's laughter floated from a nearby path. I watched a girl in yellow sandals run through the grass, her arms wide, her joy uncontained. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the world was happening without me. I was in it. With him. I used to think, Daniel said suddenly, that I wasn't meant for soft things. I turned toward him. Why? He looked down at the rippling lake, lashes shadowing his cheekbones. Because everything soft I touched fell apart. His words weren't dramatic. Just honest. Quiet in a way that made my heart ache. You didn't ruin them, I said. Maybe they were already breaking. Maybe you just happened to be there when they shattered. He blinked slowly, as if the thought had never occurred to him. Then he smiled, not a full one, but enough to reach his eyes. You always do that. Do what? Say things I didn't know I needed to hear. I didn't respond. I just leaned closer, shoulder brushing his. We sat like that for a long while, listening to summer arrive. Later, I pulled out my sketchbook, flipping through pages until I found the one I'd drawn a few days before. His hands. Not his face. Just his hands resting on his lap, one slightly curled, the other holding a pen. I handed it to him without saying a word. He stared at it for a long time. These are mine, he said quietly. Yes. He traced the edge of the sketch, not touching the page, just hovering. They look like they belong to someone who could hold a future. They do, I whispered. His eyes met mine, then dark, searching, stunned. Emma. I wasn't ready to say what I felt. Not yet. It wasn't about fear. It was about timing, about making sure the words were full when I finally let them leave my mouth. So instead, I asked, if summer could grant you anything, what would you wish for? He didn't even hesitate. To stay. My breath caught. To stay where? I asked. He turned fully toward me. Here. With you. In this, whatever this is. For once, I didn't overthink it. Didn't second-guess the trembling inside me. Then stay, I said softly. No one's asking you to leave. His hand found mine again, and we just sat there, under the sun, as June settled around us like a warm promise. And yet, even in that stillness, I felt it. A shadow under his words. A hesitation behind his eyes. Like there was something he hadn't told me yet. Something that might tip the balance if it ever surfaced. But I didn't press. Because when you're holding something fragile like a heart learning how to feel again, you don't rush the moment. You let it bloom. Even if you suspect that, one day, the petals might fall. I found it by accident. Tucked inside the second drawer of the old desk I'd let Daniel use when he worked from my place. The drawer had a tendency to stick, and when I yanked it open to retrieve a pencil, a worn envelope slid out and landed face up on the floor. It was unsealed. No name on the front. But I knew his handwriting. The slant of the T, the long descenders of his Y and G. I recognized the pen strokes like I'd recognize his voice in a crowd. And yet, I hesitated. Because some things aren't meant to be discovered like this. Still, my fingers betrayed me. I unfolded the paper, heart thudding. Emma. If you're reading this, then I've already broken the one promise I swore I'd never make, to walk into your world without telling you the whole truth. I didn't come to this town by accident. I came here for someone who died. And in the process, I found you. You weren't supposed to mean anything. I told myself I'd stay quiet, keep my head down, and leave once I got what I came for. But you happened. Your laugh. The way you draw things no one else notices. The way you talk about forgotten people like they're the ones who truly mattered. And now I don't know how to leave. But if I stay, if I tell you what I've done, maybe I'll lose you anyway. Forgive me, Emma. For this. For everything I haven't told you yet. Daniel. The paper trembled in my hands. My first instinct was denial. That this was something old, maybe never meant for me. Maybe written long before we met. But that didn't make sense. The wording was too recent. Too raw. I don't know how to leave echoed a line he said just a few days ago. He came here for someone who died. What did that even mean? I sat down on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, letter spread across my lap like it might answer the questions rising like bile in my throat. Why hadn't he told me? Why write it like a confession, like something he'd never actually give me? And worse, why did it feel like he was preparing to vanish? That evening, he showed up at my doorstep like nothing had changed. Like the sun still rose and the earth hadn't tilted beneath my feet. He held a small bag of takeout and smiled that crooked smile. I got the noodle place you like. I tried to smile back. Failed. He noticed. What's wrong? I held up the letter without a word. His face drained of color. He took a slow breath, stepped inside, and shut the door behind him like it suddenly weighed more than it used to. Emma. You should have told me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You should have said something. I was going to, he whispered. I wrote that weeks ago. I just couldn't finish it. I couldn't give it to you and watch the way you'd look at me after. Well, now you don't have to wonder, I snapped. You can see for yourself. He flinched. I'm not angry that you have a past, I said, softer now. I'm hurt that you thought you had to lie to protect me from it. I didn't lie, he said, stepping closer. I just withheld the parts of me that I thought would ruin what we had. I shook my head. Then you never gave me the chance to love all of you. You only gave me pieces. He looked like he wanted to say 1,000 things. But what came out was, the person who died, it was my brother. My breath caught. He lived here. 4 years. I didn't know until it was too late. I came to figure out what happened to him. Why no one told me sooner. Why he died alone. And did you? I asked. He nodded slowly. Mostly. But then I met you. And everything I thought I was here for suddenly didn't matter as much. I stared at him for a long time. At the boy who came chasing ghosts, and found a living, breathing heart instead. Mine. And as much as I wanted to run, to shield myself from the pain of unfinished stories and half-written truths, I couldn't. Because beneath the secrets, I knew something else. He hadn't lied to hurt me. He'd lied to protect something fragile. And that meant he had something worth protecting. Us. I don't need you to be perfect, I said, voice barely above a whisper. But I need you to be honest. From now on. I can do that, he said. If you'll let me. And just like that, the letter slipped from my hand. But the truth finally stayed. The weather forecast had promised clear skies. But by the time I reached the lake, clouds were gathering like heavy thoughts. I sat on the bench anyway, umbrella tucked beside me, sketchpad resting on my lap like always. I hadn't seen Daniel in 2 weeks. He'd said it was work, that things were hectic. And maybe they were. But his absence sat beside me like a ghost. I drew the lake anyway. Not because I wanted to. But because routine had its own kind of comfort. The ripples on the water, the curve of the distant trees, things I could control with my pencil when everything else felt uncertain. Then I heard the crunch of footsteps. I didn't look up. My heart beat faster, but I kept shading a willow branch like it mattered more than anything. If it was him, he'd say something. If it wasn't, I didn't want to know just yet. I missed this, he said softly. The world tilted slightly. I exhaled. I turned, and there he was, hair a little messy, shirt sleeves rolled up like he'd rushed here straight from somewhere else. From somewhere that wasn't this bench. That wasn't me. You've been gone, I said, trying to keep my voice light. He looked at me, really looked. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't ask why. Not yet. Instead, I moved my sketchpad to my side, and he sat beside me, just like always. For a moment, we didn't say anything. We just watched the lake. Then the first raindrop landed on my hand. And then another. And another. I reached for the umbrella, but Daniel stopped me. Wait. He looked up at the sky, eyes closed, as if letting the rain hit him was some kind of quiet absolution. I needed time, he said. Not from you. From myself. I've been scared, Emma. Of how easy this became. Of how much it started to matter. My breath caught. It matters to me too. He nodded, his eyes glinting with something soft and sad. That's what terrified me. The rain thickened, a misty veil falling between us and the rest of the world. But we didn't move. My sketchpad soaked. His book bag dampened. None of it mattered. I thought you wouldn't come back, I whispered. He reached for my hand slowly, like he was asking permission. I let him take it. I always come back to where I belong, he said. And just like that, I didn't care that we were getting drenched, that my favorite drawing was smudging, or that the world beyond this bench even existed. We sat in the rain like fools, holding hands, letting the sky cry whatever it needed to. Because sometimes, silence said more than apologies. And sometimes, coming back was all that mattered. The rain didn't return the next Sunday, but Daniel did. This time, with 2 cups of coffee and a fresh book tucked beneath his arm. He didn't say anything as he sat down beside me. He never needed to anymore. His presence alone settled something inside me. I was already sketching when he arrived this time, not the lake. This time, it was him. The curve of his jaw when he tilted his head. The way his hands held the spine of a book with reverence. The soft line of his mouth, always a second away from a smile. It felt private, intimate. As if I were tracing the outlines of how he lived in my memory. So I didn't show him. Not yet. He handed me the coffee wordlessly and opened his book. I let the quiet stretch, let the birdsong between pages and pencil scratches fill the air. But the entire time, my heart was beating a little louder. Because I knew. We both knew. Everything had shifted that day in the rain. He had taken my hand. And hadn't let go. "Do you always draw the same thing?" he asked, glancing at my pad. I hesitated. "Mostly." He smiled. "The lake's got many moods, doesn't it?" I nodded, then closed the pad before he could see the sketch beneath. Not because I was hiding it. But because some things deserved their own moment. "Daniel," I said, almost unsure of myself. He looked up. I'm not used to someone staying." His face softened. "I've always been good at being alone," I continued. "Sometimes I think I made a home out of loneliness, and this thing between us scares me, too." He gently reached out, brushing a thumb across the edge of my hand. "It scares me that I don't want to be anywhere else." We sat with that truth. The wind stirred the surface of the lake, the sun a golden blush on the water. I looked down at the sketch of him again. There was something beautiful about the way his presence had crept into the pages I once reserved for solitude. I slipped the drawing out and handed it to him. He blinked. "Is that me?" I nodded, a shy heat coloring my cheeks. He stared for a long moment, then smiled, slower than usual. "You made me look like I belong here." "Because you do," I said quietly. He folded the sketch carefully, like it was something sacred. Then he slipped it between the pages of his book, as if to keep it safe with the words he treasured. Neither of us said anything more. But in the hush of that golden afternoon, I realized something: some love stories don't crash in like waves. Some slip in like tides, quiet, certain, and inevitable. And I was already knee-deep. It was the first Sunday I sat alone in weeks. The bench felt colder, the lake duller. I still brought my sketchpad and pencils, but my hands didn't move. The ducks swam in lazy circles and the breeze tugged at my scarf, but nothing stirred in me. Because Daniel wasn't there. No message. No call. Nothing. I stared at the space beside me, where he always sat book in hand, shoulders slightly leaning toward mine like gravity had decided that was where he belonged. I waited. For an hour. Then 2. The coffee in my hand had long gone cold. I told myself not to spiral, but I did anyway. Maybe I misread everything. Maybe I had imagined the warmth in his eyes, the way his fingers brushed mine like promises. Maybe I'd done the stupid thing, fallen alone. I left before the sun dipped too far, the empty space beside me echoing with all the things we hadn't said yet. The next Sunday, I came again. Still no Daniel. By the third week, I stopped bringing coffee for two. But I came anyway, sketching things that looked too much like memories, the fold of his coat, the cup in his hand, the curve of his smile in late afternoon light. I missed him in the quietest ways. Not with grand ache or broken poetry. But in the way I looked up, still expecting him. In the way I kept my pencil still, waiting for him to arrive before I started. In the way silence wasn't comforting anymore, it was hollow. And then, the fourth Sunday, I found something tucked under the bench. A page, folded neatly. My name written on it. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it like it might disappear. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. His handwriting. Emma. I'm sorry I disappeared. It wasn't intentional. Life threw something heavy at me, and I didn't know how to carry it. I'm not used to needing people. I didn't want to bring the storm into your stillness. But the truth is, I missed you every single day. If you're still willing to share this bench, I'll be here next Sunday. Daniel. I read it again. And again. And again. The words weren't perfect. But they were real. And I'd take real over perfect every time. That night, I placed the letter between the pages of my sketchbook, right next to the drawing of him. Because he hadn't left, he'd just lost his way for a moment. And maybe love wasn't about someone never leaving. Maybe it was about choosing to come back. Sunday came again. I woke early. Too early. My heart was loud, like it already knew something today might matter. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, painting golden stripes on the wooden floor. I pressed my fingers to the folded note again, Daniel's note, and slipped it into my coat pocket. A small part of me still feared it had been a dream. By the time I reached the lake, the clouds had started to scatter, and the breeze danced lightly over the water. The world felt softer somehow, like it was holding its breath with me. The bench came into view. He wasn't there. Yet. I sat down anyway, same side, same place. I brought coffee. 2 cups. Even though it felt risky. Minutes passed. Ducks paddled by in ripples. A child giggled in the distance. Then I heard footsteps. I didn't turn right away. I couldn't. My hands curled tighter around the warm cup. And then his voice. Emma. I looked up. Daniel stood there, hands buried in the pockets of his coat, his hair messy than I remembered. His eyes, they held both apology and hope. He looked like he'd been carrying something heavy, but also like he'd finally stopped running from it. I stood. I wasn't sure you'd come, I whispered. I wasn't sure you'd wait. We stood there for a moment, words caught somewhere between us. Then I held out the second coffee. He took it like it was more than just caffeine, like it was forgiveness in a paper cup. He sat beside me. Same spot. Same bench. And for a while, we didn't say anything. Just like before. Only this silence was full of something new. I should have told you, he said finally. About my mom. She's sick. Early onset Alzheimer's. I didn't want to burden anyone. I thought I could handle it alone. I turned to him slowly. You're not a burden, Daniel. He looked at me, then really looked, and I could see the weight he'd been carrying. "I've always been the strong one," he said. "The fixer. I didn't know how to need someone. And now," he breathed out, "now I know I do." I reached for his hand. He let me take it. No fireworks. No sweeping gestures. Just fingers finding each other in the quiet. Just two people choosing to stay. And in that stillness, I realized something. Love wasn't loud. It didn't always come with declarations or grand moments. Sometimes it came back slowly, tenderly. Like a person sitting beside you again after the storm. That night, after we parted at the lake, I opened my sketchbook for the first time in weeks. The pages felt heavier now, as if they'd soaked in all the days I'd sat on that bench, waiting, hoping, hurting. I flipped past drawings of the lake at dusk, of willow trees leaning into water, of ducks frozen mid-paddle. Then I found him. Daniel, sketched in charcoal and soft lines, reading, glancing sideways, half smiling. It hurt and healed at once. The next Sunday, I brought the sketchbook with me. He was already there when I arrived, holding 2 coffees this time. That detail, that reversal, felt like a quiet promise. He stood as I approached. "I wasn't sure if you'd come." I smiled. "I told you. I'm here." We sat. Wind brushed against us like a secret. After a long pause, I handed him the sketchbook. His fingers lingered on the leather cover before he opened it. I watched him flip through the pages, eyes scanning the world I'd built in silence. When he reached the drawing of himself, he stilled. "You drew me," he said softly. "I drew how you made the silence feel." He looked at me, something warm flickering in his gaze. "I never thought I could be part of someone's piece." "You are," I said. "You were, even before I realized it." He was quiet for a long moment, then closed the book and handed it back gently. "I missed you," he admitted. I didn't rush a reply. "I missed the version of me that existed when I was with you," I finally whispered. He nodded. "Me too." The wind rustled leaves around our feet. Children laughed somewhere behind us. A bird skimmed the water. And suddenly, I remembered the first time I'd seen him, book in hand, unsure whether to sit beside me. A stranger, then. A comfort, now. "Tell me about your mom," I said. His shoulders stiffened, but only for a moment. Then he started to talk. About her favorite music. Her garden. The first time she forgot his name. I listened. Because loving someone doesn't mean fixing their pain. Sometimes it just means sitting with them while it hurts. The next few Sundays were filled with quiet things. Not grand declarations, not promises, but something softer, like trust building itself back, layer by layer. He brought me a muffin one week. I didn't ask, but he remembered the blueberry ones I liked. The week after, I brought him a book, an old copy of The Little Prince with underlined passages in faded pencil from when I was a teenager. "What is essential is invisible to the eye," he read aloud, smiling. "That sounds like something you'd underline." "It is," I said. I didn't know why back then. I think I do now. Some moments with Daniel still felt like navigating fog. He'd get quiet and drift somewhere behind his eyes, and I wouldn't follow. I wouldn't force him to explain. Instead, I'd gently sketch a leaf, a ripple in the lake, or simply sit beside him, letting the silence do its work. Sometimes healing doesn't come from questions. It comes from knowing you won't be left behind. One Sunday, he didn't show up. I waited an hour. Sketched half a heron before giving up. Just as I stood to leave, I saw him running down the path, out of breath, his shirt damp with summer sweat and panic in his eyes. "Emma, I'm so sorry," he gasped. "I couldn't find my keys. God, I thought I lost the bench. I thought I lost you." Something inside me cracked and mended at the same time. "I was just about to go," I whispered. "But you waited." "I did." He looked at me like I was the most precious thing he'd almost let slip through his fingers. And then he said the simplest, most devastating thing. "I don't know how to do this. But I want to try." My heart didn't answer with fireworks. It answered with stillness. With certainty. "You don't have to know," I replied. "You just have to keep showing up." He smiled, and for the first time, I saw it again, that quiet boy with a book who once sat beside a stranger on a bench. Only now, we weren't strangers. We were becoming something else. Something built on silence, on stories, on Sundays. Years pass like pages in a book you didn't realize you were writing. One Sunday turned into dozens, then hundreds. Seasons shifted, leaves goldened, snow came and went, the lake froze over, thawed again. So did we. Daniel never became loud in love. But he became steady. He would wrap my scarf tighter when the wind turned sharp. Leave notes in the margins of my sketchbooks. Fold paper cranes out of receipts and napkins when I looked sad and wouldn't say why. I never stopped drawing him. I have pages of him half smiles, the furrow of his brow when reading, the curl of his hand around a coffee cup. He said he didn't understand why I kept doing it. "You already know what I look like," he teased once. "I'm not drawing what you look like," I replied. "I'm drawing what you feel like." We didn't marry quickly. We didn't rush. There was no proposal with rose petals or champagne. There was a moment, one cold December morning, when he looked at me over the steam of our coffee and said, "I want to sit beside you for the rest of my Sundays. Every one of them." And I said, "Then do." And he did. The bench by the lake changed, too. It weathered, softened, aged with us. Once, the town tried to replace it with a newer one, brighter, smoother. We both protested. It held our history. So they put a small plaque on it instead. "In honor of quiet beginnings and love that lingers." Daniel wrote that. I didn't change a word. Now, when young couples pass us by, hand in hand, they sometimes smile at us. Maybe they think we're just two old people feeding ducks. But I hope they sense it, that love, real love, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's showing up. It's sitting in silence week after week until the silence turns into something sacred. It's coffee and sketchbooks, books and blueberry muffins, laughter and grief, and staying through both. And it's still sitting beside each other, long after the ink fades and the lines on your hands deepen, still choosing the same bench, and the same person. Some Sundays still feel like the first one. I come to the lake, sketchbook in hand, coffee in the other, and sit on our bench, the old wooden one that creaks slightly when I lean back, the one where it all began. It's quieter now. But not empty. The breeze still skips across the water, tugging at the edges of my coat. The ducks still bob and drift as they always have. Children still laugh in the distance, chasing echoes we once made ourselves. Life goes on. Just softer. The last day I saw Daniel, truly saw him, it was spring again. He wore that wool cardigan I always teased him about, the one with elbow patches and missing buttons. He brought my favorite coffee, still too sweet, always too sweet, but it made me smile. I think he did it on purpose. It was his version of flirting, even after all those years. He didn't read that day. He just sat there quietly beside me, watching the water with this faraway calm in his eyes. And then he said, "I had a dream last night. We were young again. You were sketching. I sat beside you, late, as always." I laughed. Nothing's changed. He turned his head, looking at me like he always did when he was about to say something that would stay with me forever. I'd still pick the same bench. And I'd still hope you'd let me sit beside you. I didn't know those would be the last words I'd ever hear him say. That night, he passed in his sleep. Just like that, quietly, gently, like the way he lived. There was no warning. Just the stillness of the morning and a hollow space in our home. I came back to the bench the next Sunday. My hands trembled. I sketched him from memory, his profile, peaceful, leaning into the sunlight. That drawing. I never finished it. I couldn't. Because some things are too whole to capture with lines. But I return. I always return. Some days, people pass by and smile. A few recognize me from the art exhibit they once saw in town. Others just see a woman sitting alone, sketching. One little girl once came right up and stared at the blank page in my lap. "Who are you drawing?" she asked. "My husband," I said softly, "the man who used to sit right here with me." She looked around, confused. "But he's not here." I smiled. "He is." She sat beside me and drew a sun with a pink crayon. I didn't stop her. Because this bench, it still holds stories. Not just mine. Not just ours. But beginnings and endings and everything in between. Love doesn't always leave when a person does. Sometimes, it lingers in memory, in laughter, in the weight of silence beside you. In a drawing half finished. In the sound of a page turning where no book lies open. And in the space beside me on this old wooden bench. I still feel him. Always. If this story moved you even a little, please like or comment, it helps more people find it. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a love story whispered just for you. We're building something special here, a space for stories that speak to the soul. I'm so glad you're part of it.